this time. So, hi, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Mid-Atlantic Territories webinar on caring for the whole family while living with ALS. My name is Jerry Prosser, and I am the Director of Care Services for the DC, Maryland, Virginia chapter. Just to let you know, I've had a couple people ask if they are muted. Yes, all attendees are muted, so don't worry about that at all. Today's panel discussion, we will be addressing some of the following questions. What does it mean to care for the entire family when a family member is living with ALS? What makes care difficult? And what are the benefits of caring for all of those impacted by ALS? Our panel today consists of former caregivers and someone living with ALS. Now, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. Please place your questions in the Q&A box that's on my screen. It's at the bottom of the screen. If you have a specific panelist that you'd like to answer your question, just include their name. But please, any questions you have, we will answer them at the end of the webinar. Just put them in that Q&A box. Once again, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming to today's webinar. So let's get started. I would like to introduce our first panelist, Sally Hartman. Now, Sally is a deacon in the Episcopal Church. She cared for her husband who passed away at home from ALS in 2019 and feels that caring for the entire family is essential. Being aware of all options to support everyone helps ease stress that is common for those involved with caring for someone with ALS. So Sally, thank you very much. I am going to go on mute and let you take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, Jerry. I am truly pleased to be part of this panel today. There is no doubt that an ALS diagnosis is one of the hardest things to have to deal with, and it affects a large circle of family, friends, and coworkers. When my husband was diagnosed with ALS, his approach was to be totally open and honest about his diagnosis. He called our children that night, and we went to see our priest the next day. My husband asked if he could talk to the congregation on Sunday. At announcements, he told them he had been diagnosed with ALS and explained his future. He wanted them to know what was going on so there would be no rumors or assumptions. But not everyone is ready or able to take his approach, and each family will need to find different ways to share the news of an ALS diagnosis. 15 years earlier, I had an HR manager who reported to me and was diagnosed with ALS. She did not want anyone to know. It made it very hard for me to respect her wishes, manage her staff who were frustrated about her continuing inability to function, and to ensure that work was getting done. In the end, I was put in the position of having to put her on disability. That caused pain on all sides, and it prevented everyone in the company who knew her from offering support to both her and her family. ALS does not affect just the person, nor the immediate family. ALS affects the whole family: brothers, sisters, grandparents, cousins, nieces, nephews, coworkers, neighbors, and friends. All those who are in the circle that know the person living with ALS. The ability to accept and then disclose the diagnosis is indeed different for each person. For those around the person living with ALS, the world has changed. Those closest see the impact and suddenly see a need for a new reality. Help will be needed, and depending on the person, what care can come quickly. In the beginning, it is dealing with the diagnosis. Are there worries about finances? The future of the family, especially if there are young children or teenagers? The impact on lifestyle, and maybe the need to renovate or relocate living space. Are there tasks that the person living with ALS has been doing that another person will need to learn, such as how to do repairs around the house, or maybe manage the daily finances? Denial may also be part of the process, and it will take some time to accept the diagnosis. Overwhelming feelings can cripple the immediate family in those first few weeks. Others in the inner circle begin to sense a need for supporting the family and are often not sure where to begin. This is normal. Everyone dealing with an ALS diagnosis feels helpless, angry, and scared. This webinar is to help with how to care for the entire community impacted by ALS. Help can come from many sources, some of which will be hard to identify in the beginning. Who is the immediate family? And depending on where they live, can they come in to support you? Who are your trusted friends? Is there need for professional help, like finding a therapist who can help with depression and grief? What faith community can support you? Or do you need to find a faith community? Most faith communities are familiar with people coming in times of crisis, and they're ready to help you and support you in your time of trial. At this time, faith in a faith community can be a source of support, but can also create additional burdens. As a person of faith, I know it's important, but it's also important to recognize that each one of us has our own faith and spiritual life. Within a family, there can be tremendous tension if there are different faith traditions and someone is trying too hard to pressure the acceptance of only one tradition. It's okay to say thank you, but I have my own faith tradition. A discussion early on with family and close friends about this may help reduce stress later. There is also a time to be honest. Admit feelings, admit fear, but once you do it, they can be very freeing. Take time to listen to all the concerns. Right now is a good time to start making a list of all the things that need to be done, some immediately and some that will later need outside help. Begin to talk with family and close friends about the immediate needs and where they can begin to assist you. This early discussion can lead to a closer group being aware of what you need and help organize things later. They can also run interference later when they understand your needs and can coordinate tasks that will free the caregiver to take care of themselves and to have quality time with your loved ones. Running interference can also take the form of limiting contacts that are well-meaning but add stress when the help is not appropriate. Close family and friends are often your best source to help providing a safe place without unneeded interference. There's no right or wrong answers to many of these questions. Questions are important. Keep identifying. Keep talking about the things that you need. Keep being willing to accept help. At this point, I would like to introduce our next panelist, which is James Sartino. James is a former caregiver for his wife of 27 years. After a cross-country move and the impact of the early pandemic, finding time and energy to care for the one you love becomes quite a challenge.
Well, thank you very much, Sally. I appreciate that. As she mentioned, we were originally from Virginia, the Roanoke, Smith Mountain Lake area, but had moved to Northern Nevada in 2016. And that's where my wife, Michelle, was diagnosed with ALS in 2019. We'd always planned to return to Virginia. Most of her family was here, so we had a house that was going to be our retirement home. So all that was more or less in place. Even though we had absolutely fantastic healthcare situation out in Northern Nevada, Michelle worked for one of the hospitals there in the healthcare system out there. Had fantastic private insurance. Home healthcare was an amazing thing. So helpful for us. I could still work and know that people were coming into the house all day long. She even got an early diagnosis because of having certain ins with the departments that stayed open late to give her some testing. And Stanford Medical over in the Bay Area in California was just a few hours away. That was where we had gone to get a second opinion and learn a lot about what we were going to be needing. However, we were renting a house out there. We couldn't do modifications. And of course, her diagnosis and declining mobility, we knew we'd had to get out of that house. And of course, coming back to Virginia, thinking, well, we've got her family here. And that's going to mean that we're going to have a lot better help, or a lot more help. And as it turns out, for a lot of reasons, that actually didn't work out. We arrived back in Virginia towards the end of February 2020. And 2 weeks later, roughly, everything was shut down because of the pandemic. I had to go into high gear, my solo mode as it was. We were wiping down groceries, limiting visitations. We had to be alone because of the virus, but it was something that I just embraced and really felt that I could do. some folks would say, oh, that's a person with a controlling personality. I never thought of myself that way. But I think ALS and the pandemic changed all that. Can't totally blame it on the lockdown, but I think that certainly was part of it. Now, I don't have a medical degree, but the things that I learned about care from the ALS clinics, both at Stanford and at Duke, where we went locally when we came back, I know things that the average healthcare provider didn't know as far as caring for a person with ALS. And there were many times that I had to correct a doctor or a nurse or tell them that Michelle needed to be treated a certain way. They just didn't know these things. And that just added to my feeling that nobody can do it better than me. It's I have to be the one. And in addition, when she started losing her ability to communicate, we had been together almost 30 years, and she felt comfortable that I knew what she was communicating. We had an eye gaze system and one of those alphabet boards that we got from Duke, and not everybody could use those, but we knew each other well enough. And I think that we were comfortable together with that communication. So again, that was one more thing that made me believe that no one could do what I could do. Of course, you get a lot of advice, and that's kind of what we're doing here today as well. But one of the things, I think the most common things that I ever heard was people reminding me to take care of myself. And I get it. I totally understood it. And I pretty much ignored it because, once again, that to me, that wasn't the most important thing. However, I realize now how short-sighted that was. I think about a race car that can, travel around a track at 200 miles an hour, and they have to have pit stops. They got to go in and get new tires. They got to fill up on gas, got to clean the windshield. And that's us. We think we can go 200 miles an hour, but we need those pit stops too. So taking care of yourself during this time is just so important, and you really can't do what I did and ignore that. Just getting away and taking a drive on the parkway for an hour sometimes is incredibly helpful. So having looking back, Monday morning quarterbacking, having regrets or whatever is always going to be the case. And I'm looking back, and I think that was something that I want to pass along as being so very, very important. Along these lines, there was a inspirational book that written by a gentleman who is a patient living with ALS, and it so perfectly aligned with what we're doing here today. I wanted to read just a couple paragraphs from that, and this is from him. His name is Dr. Ed Dobson. He says, "I don't know which is worse. Is it worse to be terminally ill, or worse to someone you love who's terminally ill? Sometimes I think it's worse to watch someone you love struggle with their own mortality. You feel so helpless. What do you say? What do you do? How do you respond? These are questions that there are no real easy answers. In addition, you have the responsibility of caring for the person who is ill, as well as caring for everyone else in the family. You're the one paying the bills. You're taking care of the kids. You fix whatever's broken in the house. You run back and forth to the hospital. You feel like a juggler with too many balls in the air, and you just want to spend as much time as possible with the person who's ill. Now, there aren't enough hours in the day to do everything that you need to do. And if there were, you wouldn't really have the strength to do it anyway. And it's hard to watch someone work that hard. You wish there was something you could do, but your disease prohibits you from helping. You wish there was something you could say, but whatever you say doesn't really change the reality of that situation. You just wish the disease would go away because of what it's doing to your family, but there's nothing you can do to change that situation." Well, hopefully today, some of the advice and the stories that you hear will help you realize that there are some things that you can do. One of the things that we're trying to do, in addition to today's webinar, is we've kicked off a compassionate kinship for caregivers program. Maybe some of you have heard about that. We have volunteer peer mentoring it's a volunteer peer mentoring program. We offer emotional support through the shared knowledge and experience of caregiving for someone that has ALS from people who have been there. And I think I've used up pretty much all of my time. I'd like to turn this over to Alessandra Dukovic. Alessandra is a former caregiver to her husband, Tyler. She navigated ALS while also raising 2 tweens. She was working full-time and eventually learning to accept help along the way. Alessandra?
Hi, James. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me on this panel. So my husband, James, was, well, he's actually James Tyler. But Tyler was diagnosed at the age of 41. And by then we had been married for 20 years. I immediately became his primary caregiver when he was diagnosed. And like James said, I was also raising teenagers. We were raising teenagers. And initially I was working full-time and later transitioned to working 30 hours a week just to maintain benefits that the family needed to stay afloat. So my plate was very full. It was beyond full. But I had some resistance to accepting help very early on in the diagnosis for four main reasons. And I just want to talk, I'm going to talk about each of these reasons in turn. But the main four reasons was, the first one is religion for us was a barrier. We also had tweens at the time at the house, and we wanted to keep our life as normal as possible for them. The third reason was that I wanted to save my asks for later. And the fourth reason was because accepting help was difficult. So turning to the first reason, religion for us, for my family, was a barrier. So we live in a small rural town in Virginia where much centers around church life, and religion is naturally a way that people extend help in this area, be it prayers, invitations to congregation, etc. The thing is that neither Tyler nor I were religious. So Tyler was a humanist, and while I'm very spiritual, I do not identify with any religion or dogma. So when Tyler was diagnosed with ALS, very well-meaning people, even those who knew that we were not religious, would give us Bibles or would give us DVDs with religious messages, hoping to help. But accepting this kind of help was really exhausting. Though we understood that this help was being offered with love, it was tiring to be put in a position of having to routinely explain that we were not religious. Sometimes explaining that we were not religious came with heavy judgment. The second reason why accepting help was difficult is with our two girls, our two teenagers, we wanted to keep life as normal as possible for them. With the diagnosis, we already had family who lived far away come to visit for prolonged periods of time. So to the kids, the home already didn't quite feel like their own home with so many comings and goings. And we didn't want to add more chaos to an already busy household. And we wanted to preserve our family life as best we could. So while I resisted getting help with things around the house or for direct care for my husband, I did recognize that I at least needed friends to give my children rights to sports events or to social activities. And limiting help to this realm allowed me to both preserve the privacy of our home and our family life, but it also granted the opportunity for the children to continue with many of their routine activities. So at least there was some continuity there, but not as much imposition in the family life. The third reason why I resisted getting help was because I wanted to save my asks for later, for when things became harder and for when I really needed it. But I learned this was a mistake. And if I had to do it all over again, like Jane said, I would accept help perhaps earlier in the process so that I could save my energy and remain strong for when hard times really hit. By the time things got really hard and Tyler was home on a ventilator and needed 24-hour, 7-day-a-week specialized care, there were very few people who could really assist us. And by that time, I was very depleted. So accepting help earlier in the process would have been much smarter on my part. The fourth reason why accepting help was difficult in my case was because it was humbling. So when I did accept help through this ALS journey, even though it was late in the game, I learned that embracing humility was actually a gift. And it's been one of the biggest gifts that I received through this. I grew as a human and I could relate much better to people from different walks of life. And above all, the vulnerability that came with accepting help also allowed me to develop a depth of connection that may not have otherwise been there with all of those who walked alongside us on this journey. I now want to turn to Randy Gregory. Without having a clue what he was facing when he was given the diagnosis of a disease with 2 to 5 years life expectancy, the best advice that Randy received was to let your friends and family help you. So here's Randy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Without having a clue what I was facing with the diagnosis of a disease with a 2 to 5 year life expectancy, the best advice I received, let your friends and family help you. Over the years, I have learned that it takes a team to fight this disease. Many of us, pals, continue to work after diagnosis, thus, our work family become counselors and guardians. It is during these conversations about life, and the assistance with carrying lunch bags, etc., it became clear that I could not do everything I used to do, and that I needed to be comfortable with receiving help from others. Motivated by the desire to allow my children and their mothers to continue to live life without being a caregiver, over time, it became easier for me to accept help from professional caregivers and friends. During the time of working with professional caregivers, you can learn if the caregiver is working with God's love in their hearts and treat you the way you would treat them if the circumstances were reversed. What help, you ask? Daily hygiene and feeding needs, designated drivers to work and physical therapy appointments, spotters in the gym, chaperones for father-daughter dances, organizers and contributors of fundraisers, cooks for meals, handyman for tasks around the house and for the van, mentors for my children, guests for special occasions, college graduations, senior day, marriage ceremony, military promotions, companions to watch sporting events, spiritual companions, and God only knows what else. Fortunately, I have a team of family, friends, and professional caregivers who have helped with a number of these tasks. Not only are they helping a friend/client in need, the time spent with a friend provides the opportunity to catch up with one another, and sometimes allowing me to engage in the former job by offering ideas for the task at hand. Additionally, for your children to see you in attendance for their significant accomplishments, college graduations, employment promotions, and marriage ceremonies, etc., the beam in their eyes keeps your heart beating and inspired. Affording your friends and professional caregivers to share in these experiences are rewarding for them also. Introducing family and friends to this world is a very tough conversation. Like many others, this is an unknown disease to you and your loved ones. Assuring young adult children, a teenage son, and a number of young men that you have been a father figure to as a basketball coach, that you are okay, while at the same time, letting them know that you will be there for them, in some respects, was more challenging than living with ALS. Additionally, thinking of what the impact of everything will be on to minor children only weigh on your concerns. It is your love for these people and for life that you choose light in this darkness. The more helping hands, the more light will shine. This is not a road to travel alone. I am not in denial of the impact this disease can possibly have, but more so I am going to beat this. This disease doesn't know me, or the strength of Jesus Christ living inside of me. I would strongly encourage any individual and their family members impacted by this disease to depend on your spiritual union with God, or who you receive peace from, to give you comfort and peace. I believe this union will surround you with caring and loving people who will help you fight. The one source of resource that I desired to have in the beginning of this journey, a fellow patient living with ALS. Someone who could tell me about their experiences and what they found to be helpful. If anyone is interested in having such a resource, please feel free to email me. In my spiritual journey, it has been confirmed God is the decision maker for when our lives are concluded, not a medical diagnosis. Live life abundantly. Life is good. God is great. H.A. Kelleher is our next presenter. During 7 years of taking care of her husband, Jeff, AJ learned the value of receiving support and remains passionate about care programs for those impacted by ALS.
Thank you, Randy. It's very hard to follow Randy. He's so inspiring to me. And I hope that so far y'all have benefited from listening to all the folks that have been on the panel. A lot of folks have talked about what's been difficult for them as far as receiving help. And that is one thing we wanted to address today. But I want to kind of focus on the benefits of receiving help. My husband and I might be in a little bit different situation than some, in that we did start receiving help pretty early on, and he lived for over 7 years with ALS. So we received a lot of help over a good number of years. But I do want to back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about the beginning, because as all of you know who are impacted by ALS, one reason that we didn't want to accept help right away is we were still adjusting to the news of getting an ALS diagnosis. We had no idea what it might mean for us. We didn't know what we might need. So part of it was just there's an adjustment period when dealing with ALS. And that kind of leads into the second reason we didn't get help, because it's so overwhelming that you have a hard time. Even somebody will say, what can we do to help? And we're like, I don't know. You're still trying to figure it out. The third reason I think that we had trouble or didn't want to get help right away is sort of along the lines of what Alessandra said. You know, if as we learned how demanding ALS is, we realized that asking anybody else to take on some of that demand and some of that burden could be too much, and that people might be able, or after a year or so, might not be able to continue to help. So we were a little reluctant to kind of open that door in fear of burning out our family and friends. And again, Alessandra covered this as well. The idea of receiving help and receiving the amount of help that we ended up needing in dealing with ALS was extremely humbling. I love the way Alessandra said that she learned to embrace that and the gift of the vulnerability that you face, because that is one of the benefits that we learned over the years. We had a number of folks, and I want to mention too, actually, before I move on, Jeff was, he found it very easy to tell people he had ALS. I found it difficult to tell people that Jeff was diagnosed with ALS. Jeff also did a lot of research to try to figure out what it might mean for him in the future. I, on the other hand, just kind of was heads down, let's deal with what we need to do right now. But Jeff did have a hard time receiving help. And he also had trouble, especially when you start talking about some of the more personal things that you might need help with. And so we kind of started slowly, I guess. We had a number of folks who were kind of adamant at the beginning that we should start receiving help right away. And those are people that knew us best and knew that it wasn't going to be an easy journey, didn't want to see me as a caregiver get burned out. So we had the fortune at our church of having a group of people that had already developed a program to help someone else who had been diagnosed with ALS in that church community. And they received so much from helping this person that when they found out that another person in their congregation had been diagnosed with ALS, they were kind of eager to help, more eager than we were to receive it, that's for sure. So we started off slowly. We're like, okay, there are people that want to help. Let's take advantage of it. I wasn't much of a cook, but I needed to eat. Jeff was still eating at the time. So we said, okay, let's let people come and bring us meals. And we developed this process based on a book called Share the Care that our church had used previously. And basically what that does is it opens it up to a number of people to sign up for when they can bring the meal. So we decided we would take meals 3 times a week, and we put it out there. Here are the days that we're looking. Here's the time frame. I had some dietary restrictions. We put those in there, and then people could read that and sign up for the time that they were able to do it. This kept anyone from feeling like they were signing up for a year-long or even a 6-month-long period of time. It's one meal at a time. You sign up. We ended up receiving meals from our church for over 6 years. So, and some people, as things came up in their lives, they would kind of step out of the ministry, and other people would come into it. We went so far as to put a bulletin in our announcement, an announcement in our bulletin at church, where people that didn't even know us were signing up to bring us meals. And it was a little bit difficult for us to have people that we didn't know coming to the house, bringing us meals, helping us out. And it might have been a little bit difficult for them as well to come into a situation of people that they don't know with a pretty devastating disease. There are some ways around that, especially for something like meals. We had people, we just left our front door open and said, hey, come on in when you get here, because I might not be able to answer the door. Other folks have put a cooler on the front porch and said, drop the meal off anytime between this time range. So there are ways to kind of ease into getting help. There's also ways to get people to, if you feel like you don't have a community that can help you, if you just moved to the area, you don't have family, you haven't established a friend connection yet, then being open to having people who you don't know help you. It's not easy, but there are people out there, good-hearted people who want to help, like the volunteers that help with the ALS Association. While it's overwhelming, there are so many benefits associated with having received help. Another area where we got help is I realized that range of motion was going to be a beneficial thing for Jeff pretty early on to keep him from getting stiff. And I knew that was time consuming. So we had a nurses ministry at our church. And so I went to one of them and asked if they might be willing to help out in providing range of motion to Jeff several times a week. And by being mostly retired nurses, they were already familiar with healthcare, maybe not ALS, but they were familiar with healthcare. Since they were retired, they weren't actively working in the field. So they were definitely looking for ways to continue to provide that type of service to folks. And I kind of had an ulterior motive of asking them, since Jeff was a little bit reluctant to receive help in certain ways, I thought, okay, let's bring some people into the home in a very non-threatening, for lack of a better phrase, way, where they're just sitting, moving his arms and legs a little bit, maybe giving a little massage, and basically just talking with him. That way he can get to know him, he can get comfortable with them. They also got comfortable with him. So it made it a little bit easier when the time came to start asking for a little bit more help. Those groups of folks ended up being the ones that would stay with Jeff if I would run out to go to the grocery store or to a dinner with a friend or something. And I was comfortable leaving Jeff in that scenario, kind of addressing what James was talking about earlier. No one can provide care as well as we can, but the more time that other people spend with your loved one with ALS, or you, if you have ALS, the better that they're going to get to know you, they're better that they'll be able to read your needs and to provide the higher level of care that we all would like for people that we love. So getting into the specific benefits of having received that help, again, it took time to get over the humbling and overwhelming nature of having so many people help us. But the benefits were just, I can't even express well enough what the benefits were. For Jeff and I as a family, obviously we received practical assistance, which took some of the burden off of me as the primary caregiver to have to take care of everything that needed to be done. Having other people come in, doing yard work. We had some people said, hey, we'll come clean. And I'll admit, I had people come and clean. They cleaned once or twice. I found that too stressful. So I was like, okay, that's not a service that I want help with. But the meals and the yard work and the even doing kind of the basic grocery shopping once a month, all of those were very practically helpful to us. As I mentioned before, it gave people a chance to interact with Jeff and get to know him when he was no longer able to speak. He could use his communication systems, but sometimes we had trouble with that. But folks that were around him very much got better and better at reading his facial expressions and his eyes, and better at asking him questions to try to figure out what it is that he might need or what he wanted to express. It also just provided more people to see our situation and to offer ways that we might be able to do things a little bit easier. It's hard to expect one person to come up with all the best ways to address any particular challenge that might come up on a given day. When Jeff was still drinking his coffee but couldn't hold the coffee mug, somebody came and built a little platform that we could set on his lap, and he could just put his hands around the coffee mug without actually having to hold it. Just little things like that that I never would have thought of. Having those folks come into the home, kind of looking and seeing what it is that we're dealing with, and offering suggestions of ways that they might be able to make things a little bit easier for us. It also allowed us to just bring more life and more fun into the home. Jeff had a great sense of humor, so I think we had fun anyway, but just having that extra energy and that extra connection with people in the home. Jeff would sit and listen to the ladies that came in and did range of motion with them. They would talk about their families, they would talk about their vacations, they would talk about their faith, they would talk about the struggles they're having. And it just gave Jeff even more a sense of purpose. A lot of the ladies called him their therapist because he was such a good listener, and it really provided them a tremendous amount. So getting into that aspect, so not only did it help Jeff and I as a family, but it helped the people that came in and helped us. A lot of people would say they would come in maybe not feeling all that great or not in a good mood, and they would leave happier than when they got there. And I think it was a combination of as we got more comfortable receiving the help, we were able to give a little bit more of ourselves, and people appreciated that. And just in general, I think most people like to give, and it gave them an opportunity to help out somebody else who could use the help. Another scenario that might not think about very often is none of Jeff's immediate family lived in town. So I know that it helped his family. They were struggling with the diagnosis of their brother and their son and their uncle. But knowing that there was a group of people that were supporting both of us, him and me, I know provided comfort to his family, given that they weren't able to be here as much as they would have liked to have been. And Jeff and I do not have kids, but I would imagine that had we had kids, letting people come in and help us with some of the practical tasks would have helped our children as well. But in general, it did give Jeff and I more quality time with each other. And I would think it would give more quality time with the entire family, the more people that come in and help take some of the burden off of us. But one of the interesting things is some of the families that helped us had kids. And I actually saw what it did for their kids. It got them so that they weren't afraid of somebody who had an illness that caused some sort of disability. It got them comfortable helping out, doing little things to support Jeff and I. And I think in the long run, it's helped them to be able to be better people and better able to open their arms to folks who maybe aren't like them. And I can't really tell my story without talking a little bit about the fact that what it boiled down to Jeff and I is that we relied heavily on our faith through that. And whether you're a Christian faith, whether you have spirituality, if you believe in anything greater than yourself, whether it's science, anything, allowing someone else to help you in a difficult situation is a huge gift to them. Especially people that love you, they want to help, and allowing them to help. It really is a gift that helps all the parties grow and to get better. Those of us that have been impacted by ALS, we have a lot to offer. And I know you all know that. Sometimes people might look at somebody with ALS and think maybe they don't have a lot to offer, but I guarantee you, you have more to offer than the average person. You can teach others how to give and receive help. You can teach them how to deal with a devastating disease. There's just so much there that we can offer to the other people. So as I wrap up the presentations today, I'd like to mention that the ALS Association does have a program very similar to the Share the Care program that Jeff and I used. It's called Care Connection. Care Connection is available today, as some of y'all probably know. It's out on the ALS website. And basically it's a calendar that allows a family impacted by ALS to define what tasks they might like help with, the timing that would need to occur. And then you can invite people via email to be a part of that community. It's a private community that only people that you invite to be a part of it can be a part of it. So if that's something that you think you might be able to benefit from, even if it's something once a week, it's a good way to organize volunteers to help with that. And one of the tasks, or one of the barriers to receiving help, is as a caregiver, I just didn't have time to think about or plan how to receive help. So the association is hoping to pilot a program later this year that will utilize volunteers to help figure out what tasks you might want or need help with, and to actually coordinate that group of volunteers. So that'll kind of piggyback off of the Compassionate Kinship program that James mentioned earlier, where folks who maybe already have a connection with a family can help them figure out where are some areas that maybe we could receive some help. So what I'd like to do at this time is we're going to open it up to question and answers. I know Jerry has been receiving some of the questions that might already be out there. I'm going to ask the rest of the panelists to come back on. And if you have any questions, if there's something we didn't cover or something that you're struggling with, or want to know more about our stories, please just let us know.
Thank you, AJ. I appreciate that. We do have some questions. Once again, questions can be put in mine's on the bottom of my screen, the little Q&A symbol down at the bottom. So we're just going to go ahead and ask some of these questions. Now, I'm going to open this first one up to everybody, and I am. So the question is, yeah, I am. As a family member, how do you support the person diagnosed with dealing with the depression that occurs when they are in denial of the depression? That's a tough one.
I can speak for just 1 minute and pass it
Please.
on to others, but I think that's a very real thing. I think that when Tyler was diagnosed, he did go into a depression. And for me, it was about nudging him to just get out of bed and take a walk around the block. So it really was, it was baby steps. And I think that once we did that over time, eventually there was more opening. And I think, you know, it's individual, it's for every person, it's going to be different. For us, it was really taking one step at a time, literally getting out of bed and taking a few steps outdoors, going to the mailbox, and then eventually, you know, walk around the block, and then from there build a little bit more mental health.
Thank you. AJ, were you going to add to this?
I think James was, but
Okay.
Well, I told him, I said I might say a little bit too. I guess I would just say that the depression is real, and my husband ended up starting to have anxiety, and he didn't think he was depressed, and I don't know, maybe he wasn't. Be surprised if he wasn't, as most other people would be surprised if he wasn't a little bit depressed, but his was manifesting as anxiety. And we talked to a few folks, and he was willing to try some anti-anxiety medicine and even a mild antidepressant. So while I don't jump to medication in any aspect of healthcare as the first answer, there's a legitimate need for the medications that are out there. And I think that's something to certainly discuss with your medical team. And as Sally mentioned, if you have a faith community, again, no matter what it is, just somebody who knows you and knows your beliefs and your spirituality and your whatever it is, talking through that sort of thing with them, I would think would be beneficial as well.
Of course, that's where one of the things I was gonna go. If you have faith in the family, that's certainly a place to turn to. And you could probably both use it, because I know that, Michelle there was certainly a period of time where she was very depressed, and I was too, and we through the help of a friend, we actually got some professional help as well. We had some counseling sessions every now and again, and I certainly think that could, a lot of that's just beyond us. We can only do so much if we're not professionally trained. That's one maybe left for the professionals.
Thank
The
you.
one, I would say one of the things that really helped my husband, it was by sheer chance. He had a friend that was determined that he was going to get out. And Duncan would come and take my husband out for a movie, go sit on the deck and get a beer. And I think it's important to encourage those friends that are willing to do that, because very often they can say something we can't say. And often my husband would talk to Duncan, and I know in ways he would never talk to me. So I think it's really, really important to encourage that close friendship if at all possible.
So thank you guys. The next question is, my spouse is adamant about his privacy and does not want anyone to see him and only wants me to be the caregiver. How can I convince him to allow help?
I'll start with that real quick. Just, take it slow. In other words, just try baby steps, try little things. Hey, would you be interested in having somebody come over and read a book to you if you can't hold the book? Or, somebody wants to come by for a visit, or how about a, phone call or Zoom call if you're able to communicate in that way. Just take it slow, take it small. And the other thing I would say is it's going to be more helpful if if the loved one with ALS will allow somebody to come and do some of their personal care. But if that's not the case, find ways that other people can help you as the caregiver, whether it's bring you a meal, leave it on the front step, whether it's go out and do yard work, but don't come in the house. Those are my few thoughts on that.
Maybe one other thing to do is we're recording this webinar, so maybe let them sit in on this, show them this webinar so you can hear some of our advice, if you want to call it that.
All right, thank you guys very much. So the next one is, did any of the ALS patients consider taking their life by suicide? I don't want to be held prisoner in my own body.
I've got to go back to what I said earlier about professional help. I had a very dear friend. This was not ALS related, but who did take his own life, and that is something that has to be dealt with professionally, in my mind, and swiftly if that occurs.
Okay.
Yeah, all I would say is that, that's real. The thought of the progression of ALS and how that might look is got to be terrifying. It was terrifying enough as the spouse. Can't imagine if it were actually me, and I don't know how I responded to that. So I totally echo what James said, but also just relying on what Sally and others have said, relying on your friends and relying on your faith community to just help you work through it, and to not do anything drastic is what I'd say, is just because people love you no matter what.
Thank you all. So the next question is one that you would have thought had been placed here just for me. So I'm going to answer it. I'm interested in the mentoring program that James mentioned. How can I get in touch with someone? So the Compassionate Kinship Program is a program run by our chapter, but it is open. I know there might be some folks from South Carolina and West Virginia on this. What it is, just a brief overview of the program. We do have trained mentors, folks that have gone through what you all are going through. It is just to have someone to talk to. There's really, I think the best thing, and I say that just is to just have someone that understands what you're going through. Now, how can you get involved in this or get into the program? Reach out to your care service coordinator, and they will be able to start the connection, tell you a little bit more about it. So that one was for me, right there. So thank you very much. The next one is question 1 for James, and I'm watching our time. So we watching our time here. Question 1 for James. How much does home help cost? How much is covered by insurance?
That's a great question. So initially, when we were in Nevada, as I said, we had really great, private coverage, and there was no cost through that, within a given number of visits per week. And even after we both weren't working any longer, because Michelle was eligible for disability, which I believe is a national, correct me if I'm wrong there, but a person diagnosed is automatically eligible for disability, and thus Medicare. And again, they have very strict number of visits. You can kind of customize those, the types of visit, whether it be physical therapy, occupational therapy, an RN, or so on, a CNA, but you only get so many per week or per month, I guess it is. So, and I see that the next question is, does the employer provide insurance even when we take a bill? I don't believe, I'm not an insurance expert, I don't believe so. I believe once you get on Medicare, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that is covered.
Can I jump in here?
Yes, please.
And I'm gonna try to make this brief. So please reach out to your care service coordinator for more details on this, because this could be a whole webinar in itself. What I'm going to tell you is, if a person has the diagnosis of ALS, and then they can apply for Social Security disability if they're under the age of getting Social Security. Okay. Then if they have enough work credits in there, then they would be eligible for Medicare. It's not a given. If you have someone who's never worked, then they've never paid into the system, and unfortunately, they will not be eligible for Medicare. What I would tell you to do is look at your insurance policy. If you have a private insurance through your employer, maybe even ask for a case manager at the insurance company to help you figure out what is available. It can be quite costly to go through some agencies. So some people will look elsewhere to hire someone through friends or other avenues. When you do that, obviously you have to fully vet the person, and then you're responsible for their payroll taxes.
Jerry, the other thing I would say is, if you are still working when you're diagnosed, is go talk to the HR specialist in the company.
Yes.
There are insurance policies that there are ways you can continue the coverage. You may have to pay for it, but there are a variety of things, and they are the best source to say, what can you do for me and how can you help me, including helping find the right case manager.
Thank you. Thank you, Sally. Yes, you are correct. So I would say, if you have any more questions about that, reach out to your care service coordinator, and they can at least try to direct you, because like I said, that can be a whole webinar in itself. So the next question is, at what point do we ask for help? Currently, my husband is working from home and is still mobile, walks with a walker. I don't have to help him with anything. When people ask what they can do, I'm not sure how to handle that.
Yeah, that is a good question, because if you truly don't need help, the only thing I would suggest is just keep those family and friends connected to y'all. Just have them over to visit. Maybe you could say, hey, we'd love to catch up with you. Maybe they'd even be willing to bring a meal over to y'all, just to spend time together. But I would say that is the perfect scenario to get both you and your loved one with ALS used to having people coming into the home, spending time with you, watching. The advantage, this is going to sound weird, as someone is there from the beginning and sees the progression, sometimes that's a little bit easier to deal with it than having somebody come in when it's progressed, pretty far and everyone's still kind of figuring out what it means. So I would say just at a minimum, spend time with those people who want to do something for you.
Take
Thank you.
advantage of going out for a meal now while you're still somewhat mobile. If it's uncomfortable, that's a way to begin to get over that discomfort of being out, and invite a friend to go with you. Maybe meet another couple for dinner and let them get used to having someone help them get in and out of a restaurant, in and out of a car. I think it's harder to do it later, so it's better to do it in the beginning.
Thank you. So this is more of a comment than a question, and then we're going to end with the last question. I have to leave this meeting now. Thank you all for supporting ALS, the ALSA and ALS patients and families. Good luck, Randy. So I am going to move that one. And the last question we have today is, does depression manifest as anger? I'm going to say what I tell people. My answer to that is definitely yes. And I tell people that sometimes a person will show anger toward family members because they're not going to be the ones to leave. So I open this question up to the others.
It manifests itself in many different ways, which makes it very hard to recognize that it's depression as the underlying.
Right. We went through a period of that, definitely. Thankfully, it was kind of a short period, but Michelle was very angry, obviously, with the situation, but a lot of it was directed at me. And thankfully, she told her family and her sisters, and then ultimately me that that was not really the case. It was a temporary thing, but it was very real and very difficult. And as the caregiver, just understand where that's coming from, I guess. And this person loves you and you love them, and it's temporary, hopefully.
I've had people say to me, it's not the person that you love, it's the disease, when they're lashing out in anger.
And the caregiver can also be angry, and there's depression for the caregiver. So I think it's
Yes.
It's a tough, yeah. We've all been there, I think. Yeah.
Well, the last two things are just basic comments, and thank you so much for all your time and support. It's really very helpful to know someone else's journey and learn from it. So thankful to have such a support. And I once again say, remember the Compassionate Kinship Program. This support can be carried on. And then thank you for the helpful information. So with that being said, let me make sure I didn't miss any. I did not. With that being said, I want to thank everybody for attending, for taking time out of your day. And I want to thank the panelists. It's been just really nice working with you all forming this webinar. So our next webinar is coming up next month, and I apologize. I think it's the 16th. I should have written it down. It's going to be on palliative care, understanding it, and hospice and the differences. So your care service coordinators will be putting that out. So thank you guys. If there aren't any more questions or anything, or any comments from our panel, we are going to call it an afternoon.
Just thanks to you, Jerry, and the association for everything y'all do and putting these together.
Thank you. It's been easy with y'all. All right. So very good, you all. See you next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.